Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the introduction. I'll just be, talking about the RALP program. I'm mainly going to talk about like the practices that you can do on your farm. It's still kind of a broad presentation just because they haven't released all the funding lists and the applications yet. They likely won't be available till February 1st. But if you do have like questions specific to funding about like a project that you want to do, definitely feel free to put in those questions and I can try to answer it kind of based on what they've done in 2024, as they probably won't change a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, I'll just move to the next slide. So before I start talking about kind of all the beneficial management practices that you can put in, I'll just start by talking about ecological goods and services. So kind of the purpose of the RALP program is that by implementing these beneficial management practices, you'll be producing ecological goods and services on your land. And so those are the services that are provided by nature, and they benefit humans. And these are just a few of those examples, like carbon sequestration, improving water quality, biodiversity enhancement, drought and flood resilience, air quality, and soil health. And then the types of projects you can do, I'll just get into that. It's RALP kind of has it broken down into 4 main sections. So the first one is pasture management. The second one is projects more related to annual cropping, the tree planting projects, and then the last one is wetland projects. So I'll just start with those pasture projects. So the first project is riparian area management. The riparian area is that green zone around water bodies like rivers, streams, lakes, and wetlands. And for this project type, you can apply for fencing to manage those, to manage livestock access. That doesn't necessarily mean excluding cattle from those areas, but just being able to have the cattle graze there at different times of the year and manage it a little differently than you would maybe your upland areas. You can also apply for alternate water sources, so the cattle aren't wading into those water bodies for access, or if you do fence it off, then you can have an alternative watering source. And then the last one you can apply for is water crossings. This one's a little bit different just because there are some permitting requirements around the water course crossings. So you would have to reach out to Alberta Environment and Protected Areas for that one specifically. And they can, kind of let you know on what kind of permits you'd be required to do. But there is funding through RALP if you did want to do the water course crossing. And then the benefits for that one, as examples, would be improved water quality, improved herd health if they're not going into a water body anymore to access water, improved biodiversity and wildlife habitat, and then reduced erosion. The idea with that is just there'd be kind of less bare ground with the cattle not accessing those softer, wetter areas. The next subcategory, I guess, under pasture management is rotational grazing. It can also be called multi-paddock grazing or mob grazing, and there's a bit of definition differences between those, but overall, the overarching principles are essentially the same, that you're going to graze in an ecologically beneficial manner. And it follows those 4 main grazing principles of balancing forage supply and livestock demand, distributing your grazing pressure, providing rest to areas, and avoiding grazing during sensitive times. Like an example for that one will be not grazing wet areas in the spring when it's going to be really wet, and maybe grazing it later in the fall when those areas are usually drier. And then projects for this one would be cross fencing. So you'd be putting in cross fencing on your fields to kind of make smaller paddocks in those areas and be able to better manage the cattle in those areas. And then kind of as an addition, since you are splitting up the fields, the cattle may not have access to water as easily, so you can apply for alternative water sources for those areas as well. And the benefits for this would be improved soil health, improved drought resilience, and increased carbon sequestration. And the next one, still under pasture management, is adding legumes to forage stands. And that's a pretty straightforward one. It is exactly what it sounds like. You're just seeding in perennial legumes into an existing pasture or hay field. RALP doesn't really care how you do it, but they give examples of drilling seed in, broadcasting, or even mixing it in with the mineral. And just like some examples for legumes that people have seeded in, lots of different clovers. Alfalfa is really common. If you're looking for like non-bloat varieties, you can look at bird's foot trefoil, Sicer milk vetch, or sandfoin. And then the benefits for this one would be improved pollinator habitat, drought resilience, increased forage quality, weed suppression, improved soil structure, nitrogen fixation from those legumes, and improved soil health. This one's kind of moving into the second category now of crops. So this one is annual crop conversion to a forage. So if you do have land that you're currently cropping and you're wanting to convert it to a native or tame forage, you can apply for the seed cost as well as a seeding operation. And you can, either graze this or hay the area once it's been seeded. And then the benefits for this one would be reducing your inputs like fertilizer and fuel, reducing erosion, increasing soil carbon, improved water conservation, enhanced biodiversity, creating habitat, improved water quality, and improved soil health just by having that perennial living root in the ground year round as opposed to an annual crop. This next one, the strips, grass waterways, and saline areas, is really similar to converting those annual crop acres to perennial forage, but this is more focused on those marginal areas, like the water runs or areas that don't typically grow annual crop very well. So instead of seeding like a whole field, it would just be like specific areas that are quite marginal and don't do as well. And again, similar benefits for that one. So reduced sedimentation, enhanced infiltration, salinity management, nutrient cycling, and reduced flood risk. The next one here is intercropping. This would be planting 2 annual crops at the same time is kind of the minimum requirement for it. And one of them has to be a pulse crop. So like canola peas is really similar or really common, and lentils could be an option for a legume. Around my area, faba beans are quite common, soybeans, chickpeas. So as long as you have, the 2 annual crops and pulse, RALP doesn't really care what you end up doing with it in the end, whether you want to kind of use it for feed, or if you want to, harvest it kind of like a typical annual crop and then separate the seeds afterwards, that's fine as well. The project benefits for this one include improved utilization of available resources, nitrogen fixation from that pulse that you're going to include, increased crop productivity, reduced weed competition, and reduced disease pressure. The next one is cover crop cocktail. Funding is pretty similar for this one as it is with the intercropping, but it's slightly different requirements. So this one has to have 3 or more annual crops versus the intercropping project just requires 2, but it does still have that minimum requirement of having 1 legume or pulse in that mix. And again, similar benefits, helps with soil erosion, biological diversity, improving the nutrient cycling, nitrogen fixation from that legume, increased soil organic matter, improved weed control, and decreased fertilizer input. There are a lot of companies now too offering like cover crop, like commercial blends. Those are fine as well. So if you get a mix and it has, yeah, like kind of more forage species like the clover, alfalfa, sandfoin, that kind of stuff, that would fall under this beneficial management practice. And the next category is the tree planting category. So the first subcategory is tree establishment. So that would be putting in a new shelter belt or planting or widening an existing eco buffer. With this one, it does have to be a new action. So they won't replace an existing shelter belt. I know a lot of the shelter belts are kind of getting old. You do have to have that additional widening in order to apply for RALP for this one. And then the benefits for this one would be carbon sequestration. The windbreak is an obvious one, reduced erosion, improved snow water retention, improved air quality, wildlife habitat, pollinator habitat, and increased biodiversity. And the pollinator strips is really similar to the tree establishment, but instead of just having trees, you also have things like shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers. Ideally, when you're planting the flowers, they will be blooming kind of throughout the growing season. So trying to pick flowers or grasses and stuff that will be blooming throughout the season rather than just at one time is a good idea. And then the benefits for this one are improved biodiversity, stormwater filtration, reduced nutrient runoff, and reduced erosion. And then the last category is wetland restoration and construction of new wetlands. I don't have a lot of detail in this slide, mostly because with this one, like the watercourse crossing, you do have to go through environment and protected areas. And they have a wetland replacement program that you would go through, and then RALP just has additional funding for that as well. And they've just been paying like on a per acre basis for this specific project type. And the benefits for this one are drought and flood resilience, improved biodiversity, improved water quality, wildlife habitat, groundwater recharge, nutrient cycling, and improving on-farm water availability. So yeah, that's kind of all the BMPs. Just to go over like some eligibility things, all of the, well, RALP and pretty well all of the SCAP programs with the province do have eligibility requirement of being like a primary producer. So you're doing the day-to-day management of the farm and you're producing $25,000 worth of farm commodities annually. And then the second portion for RALP specifically is that you are required to have an environmental farm plan. So if you don't know what a farm plan is, it's free and it's a self-assessment tool more for your knowledge, and it'll go through all different aspects of your farm and you'll answer questions. And at the end of those questions, it'll ask you to create an action plan in order to reduce your environmental risk. This isn't like a commitment to taking those actions. Like I said, it's more for a learning opportunity. So it's just to get you to think about on ways that you could reduce it, but don't necessarily have to. And at the end of that, you'll get a certificate. RALP won't ever see like the specific details of your farm plan, but you will give them the certificate that just has your name on it, saying that you've completed it. If you already have a farm plan, it just has to be up to date. So within the last 10 years, you've completed one. And if you don't already have one, RALP is over a 3-year term. So you can apply February 1st, 2025, and you have until 2027 during your final report to submit that certificate that you've completed your farm plan. So it is a pretty in-depth process, but you have 3 years to complete it, so that should be plenty of time. And this is the website, the albertaefp.com. That's where you can go. Everything's done online now, so you'll be assigned a technician. If you do need help filling things out, you can reach out to the technician that's assigned to you, and you can get started here at their website. Yeah, covering costs. So RALP obviously is one of the funding programs that will help you implement these beneficial management practices. But hopefully when you do implement these, you'll also see some cost savings, either from things like reduced inputs or different benefits, like direct benefits like pollinator support or improving your water access. And then some indirect benefits like reducing your overhead, like reducing fertilizer usage. Yeah, and like Kate mentioned, applications are closed, but they will be reopening February 1st, 2025. So now's a really good time to kind of start working on that plan. On their website, they do have the sample application that you can have a look at if you haven't already. They also have the 2024 funding list that kind of goes into great depth of what you can apply for and how much they will fund. A lot of things they do fund 100%, but they do have certain cost maximums for certain things. So do take a look at that. And they do pay some labor costs for certain things, like seeding costs. They have a certain amount for that as well. So do take a look at the website on February 1st, as they'll be kind of updating all that information. And I did just want to mention too, to not purchase any supplies before February 1st. Last year, they had allowed for certain things to be on hand. So seed, you were allowed to have on hand, and fencing materials like posts and wires were allowed to be on hand. But pretty much anything else, like the watering systems and stuff that you might want to purchase, or the trees. I guess the trees kind of had a different rule too. You could purchase it 6 months before February 1st, but watering systems for sure, definitely don't purchase until February 1st. And yeah, apply early. Last year it filled up kind of mid-May. So if you can start now working on your maps and kind of having a good idea of what projects you want to implement, yeah, the better off you are. And then this is just some contact information for the Program Access Liaison. So this phone number, the 1-866-310, I believe it's 7257, the 310 RALP. That goes to me and the other Program Access Liaisons. And we also have our own email, the info@ralp.ca. That also comes to me and the other Program Access Liaisons. So if you do need help completing your application, or if you have general questions about the program, you can reach out here. The province has their own separate email, and that's where you'll submit your application to. So they will actually see your applications. So if you have like questions about like the status of your application, then you would contact the province directly. And then this is just their website. So this is where you're going to find the application forms, the funding list. I believe they have like a sample contract there if you want to read through the terms and conditions, all that stuff you can find here. It's super long, but if you type in ralp.ca, RALP.ca, it should auto-direct you there. And that's the end. I'll just go back to the last slide if anybody else needs to jot that info down. But if you have any questions or comments about anything, yeah, feel free to ask those.
Thanks, Jenna. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, like she said, you could put them in the chat, or else if you'd like, you could just unmute yourself as well and just say something out loud, if you'd like. And I'll just say quick, I guess, before, if anyone's thinking of any questions, just regarding the environmental farm plan. So Jill and I both are EFP technicians. So if anyone is wanting to get started on their environmental farm plan, has questions or anything like that, you can definitely sign up. And then if you're within the County of Grand Prairie, your workbook will automatically be sent to one of us. And then we'll be able to review it, and we can meet with you in person or online or however you would like it. So there's support available for the EFP as well, just so you know.
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions that they can think of after the presentation, feel free to contact either Kate or myself. And then we can try to help you as much as we can, or we can reach out and get you the information that you need.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out directly to, the liaisons. We're, happy to help.